Now, one thing that can confuse people new to Android Studio are the templates that Google include with it, especially as they sometimes change them when they release a new version. Now, I try to keep the course up to date, but with new versions of Android Studio coming out every few months, there will be times when it looks a little bit different to how it appears in these videos. So I'm going to create a couple of new projects using some of the templates that are currently shipping with Android Studio and show off some of the ways that they differ from each other. Now remember that these are just templates though. They're provided to save you having to type in some of the basic code that projects need, but there's no reason why you can't change any of the code that the templates create. If you use a template that includes a menu, for example, but decide that you don't want to provide a menu in your project, then you can just delete the menu code. And if you've used a word processing program such as LibreOffice or Microsoft Word, then you may be familiar with the concept of templates, and these are really no different. Alright, so let's have a look at the templates, and I'm going to start by creating a new project. Now, if you're watching this video in the Kotlin course, make sure that the Include Kotlin support box is ticked. That's the default, and probably already will be ticked. So I'm going to start off anyway and click on Start a New Android Studio Project. And we can see this button that I'm talking about down here, Include Kotlin Support. So again, that's the default. It probably is already clicked, and if you're in the Kotlin course, make sure that is clicked. But if you're watching this video in the Java course, you need to untick that box. Leaving it ticked will cause Android Studio to generate Kotlin rather than Java code. Now, I'll mention that each time we create a new project, at least for the first few projects, so that you generate the correct code for the language you're using. Now, I'm going to untick the box, and that's because Java programmers don't need to know anything about Kotlin, but Kotlin programmers will need basic familiarity with Java. So whenever a video shows code in both courses, I'm going to show the Java code. Don't worry though, if we need to write any code at all, there'll be separate videos for each course. So in the Kotlin course, keep that box ticked, then you can compare the Kotlin code on your screen with the Java code that's going to appear on mine. So leave everything else on this screen. As I said, for this particular application, I'm doing something a little bit different, and I'm including, and I've unchecked the box. I'm going to click on Next. We'll leave everything else as it is, and on this next screen, we're going to leave everything else as it is as well. Now, we're going to be explaining these screens in the next video, but for now, I just want to focus on the templates. So I'm going to click on Next. Now, at the time I'm recording this, Android Studio ships with 13 templates. And the images on this selection screen try to give you an indication of what they contain. Now, add no activity. This one here is the most basic, but I generally don't use that for most apps because we normally need at least one activity. Now, I'm not going to go through describing all the templates because a lot of the explanation won't make much sense just yet anyway. And in fact, you may be wondering what this activity that I've just mentioned is, but don't worry, I'll be explaining all that next. Now, once you're comfortable with Android Studio and you've worked through a few of the apps in this course, by all means have a go at creating projects based on each of these templates to get a feel for what they provide. For now, the only ones we really need to use are the basic activity and the empty activity. So basic and empty. Now, you can see from these images that basic activity contains a little bit more than the empty activity template. You can see the icon for the drop-down menu at the top right, and it also has a floating action button, this little yellow button at the bottom right. So if your app will include a menu or floating action button or both, then you'd probably be best off starting with the basic activity template. But if you don't want either of those, then use the empty activity template instead. But what if you want a menu but not a floating action button? Well, in that case, you can either start with an empty activity and add the menu code, or, and this is probably easier, start with a basic activity and delete the code for the floating action button. So I'm going to start by choosing this empty activity over here so that we can see what that provides. Now, on the next screen, as I click that, I'm going to leave everything as it is and accept the default values. So we'll see this activity name and layout name used in a minute. So just remember that they're called main activity and activity underscore main, and click on finish. Now, Android Studio takes a little while to create the project. Then you should end up with something that will look a little bit like this once this is finished. So I'll just fast forward this. Alright, so you should end up seeing something that looks a little bit similar to this. Now, the version of Android Studio that I'm using to record this video starts off in what's called Android View after creating a new project. And you can see this Android tab up here in the top left-hand corner, and Android was the default mode that's been selected. Now, some people prefer to work in Project View, but it really doesn't matter which one you use. We can switch to Project View by clicking Project, And then we can expand the list selection of folders and expand the details out of our application. Now, some of the other views won't show most of the files we need, so I won't be using them in this course. Now, the app that we've created is called My Application. Well, it's actually called My Application 2, and that's because I already created one previously called My Application. And I expanded that view, and you saw that there was this app folder. I can expand that, click that open, and this is where most of the files we're interested in are located. Now, in Android view, we switch back to that. The app folder is at the top level, this one here, and I can expand that out. And this is why many people prefer to work in that view. More files are visible in Project View, but most of them are the ones that you don't generally need to worry about. The main files we have to change or create are in this Java or Res folders, or we can switch back to Project View. We can expand that out. We've still got the source, main, we've got the Java and Res folders here. They're just a little bit in a slightly different location when in Project View compared to Android View. So it's the same set of files essentially, just presented in a different way. So choose whichever view you're most comfortable with. I'll be mainly using the Android view in this course. Now over on the right hand pane up here, there's two files open. activity_main.xml and mainActivity.java. Now these are the names of the activity and the layout from the earlier screen. Now if we close these, we can open them up by just opening the particular folder. In the case of the Java folder, we can double click main activity to open them up, and the activity_main, we can look at the layout folder and double click that and open it up like that. And again, going back to Android view, we can see essentially the same thing. Opening up, and we can see that our main activity file is there, and then in the res folder and the layout folder, there's our activity_main.xml. Now, the activity_main.xml defines what the screen for the activity will look like. And if I go into this design tab, which is selected currently anyway, you can see that it looks very similar to the template image. There's no menu icon showing and no floating action button, just the text hello world, as you can see there. Now, main activity also doesn't contain very much. If we have a look at that, don't worry about what any of this code means at the moment. I'm just showing you what the templates look like so you don't get stuck when Google changes them again in the future. And also don't worry that this is Java code if you're watching this in the Kotlin version of the course. Anything we do with the screen layouts is the same regardless of the language used, so some of the videos are the same for both courses. Now we can see that we've got a class here called mainActivity, and that's got a single method called onCreate. So class name, method name. Make a mental note of that, and then we'll see how the next template differs. So what I'm going to do now though is end the video, and in the next video we'll go ahead and we'll create a second project, this time based on the basic activity template. So I'll see you in the next video.